When I told my children I was moving to the Philippines, they thought I had lost my mind. I was 71 years old, living on Social Security and a small pension, widowed, retired, and preparing to leave the only country I had ever called home. My son asked if I was having some kind of late life crisis. My daughter begged me to slow down and think it through. A few friends told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Looking back now, I understand why they were worried. Most people my age were trying to make life simpler. I was selling my belongings, packing 2 suitcases, and preparing to fly halfway around the world to a country I had never even visited. What they didn't understand was that I wasn't chasing adventure. I wasn't looking for excitement. And I certainly wasn't running away from my family. I was trying to solve a problem that millions of retirees face every single day. And over the next year, I learned 10 lessons that completely changed the way I think about retirement, money, family, stress, and happiness. One lesson involved money. One involved family. One completely changed how I deal with stress. And the final lesson made me realize I had been thinking about retirement all wrong for decades. I'll share all 10 lessons in a moment. But first, let me explain why a 71-year-old man decided to leave America behind. For most of my life, I considered myself an ordinary man. I wasn't wealthy. I wasn't an investor. I didn't own multiple homes or have a giant retirement account waiting for me. I worked, paid my bills, raised my family, and like most people, I assumed that if I did the right things long enough, retirement would eventually become easier. Instead, it seemed to become more complicated. Every year felt a little tighter than the one before. Property taxes increased, insurance costs climbed, groceries became more expensive. Utility bills seemed determined to find new ways to surprise me. Nothing dramatic happened overnight. That's what made it so frustrating. There wasn't a single event I could point to, no financial disaster, no emergency, no crisis. It was more like a slow leak. Month after month, year after year, a little more money went out and a little less stayed behind. I wasn't broke, but I wasn't living the retirement I'd imagined either. There were no vacations, no spontaneous road trips, no dinners out without thinking about the cost. Every purchase became a calculation. Every unexpected expense felt like a setback. What bothered me most wasn't the money itself. It was the feeling that after 40 years of working, I was still worried about making it to the end of the month. One evening, I was sitting at my kitchen table looking over my bills. Nothing unusual had happened. No emergency, no major expense, just another ordinary month. Yet somehow, I felt more stressed than I had when I was still working. And that's when a question entered my mind. If this was retirement, was this really all there was? That question stayed with me for months. At first, I ignored it. Then I started researching. I watched videos about Americans living overseas, read articles, compared costs, looked at different countries. One place kept appearing over and over again. The Philippines. People talked about affordable living, friendly communities, English-speaking locals, warm weather. But one thing caught my attention more than anything else. Many retirees said they felt less stressed. At first, I thought they were talking about money. Later, I realized they were talking about something much deeper. And that became the first lesson I learned. Sometimes the biggest risk isn't making a change. It's staying exactly where you are. For months, I kept looking for reasons not to go. I told myself I was too old. I told myself it was too risky. I told myself I should be grateful for what I already had. But every time I sat down to pay bills, the same thought returned. What if there was a better way to live? Not a richer life, not a luxury life, just a life with a little more breathing room, a little less stress, a little more enjoyment. Eventually, I stopped asking whether moving overseas was crazy. I started asking a different question. What if staying was the bigger risk? And once I arrived in the Philippines, I learned something that surprised me even more than the lower cost of living. Because the second lesson had nothing to do with money. It had everything to do with stress. Lesson number 2 was about stress. Not the kind that comes from emergencies, the kind that quietly follows you around for years, the kind you stop noticing because it becomes normal. Back in the United States, I thought stress was simply part of adulthood. There was always something waiting around the corner, a bill, a repair, a medical expense, a problem that needed solving. Even after retirement, that feeling never completely disappeared. In some ways, it became worse. When you're still working, you feel like you have options. You can work overtime, pick up extra hours, find another job, earn a little more money. But retirement is different. For many of us, the numbers become the numbers. Your income is mostly fixed, and every increase in expenses feels personal. What surprised me was how long I carried that pressure without realizing it. I thought it was normal. I thought everyone felt that way. Then I moved to the Philippines, and for a while, nothing seemed different. I was still adjusting, learning my surroundings, getting settled, figuring out where to shop, learning how things worked. Life was new, but my mind was still operating the same way it always had. Then one evening, about 3 months after arriving, I was sitting outside near a small neighborhood store. The sun was beginning to set. Children were playing basketball in the street. A few neighbors were talking nearby. Someone was cooking dinner, and the smell drifted through the air. It wasn't a special day. Nothing important happened. No major realization. No dramatic moment. At least that's what I thought. Then I noticed something. For the first time in years, my mind wasn't racing ahead. I wasn't thinking about next month's bills. I wasn't mentally solving problems that hadn't happened yet. I wasn't worrying about things outside my control. I was simply sitting there, watching life unfold around me and enjoying it. That may not sound like much, but for me, it was a bigger change than the lower rent, bigger than the cheaper groceries, bigger than the money I was saving. Because I had spent so many years focused on surviving that I had forgotten what it felt like to simply exist without constant pressure. Now, don't misunderstand me. Moving to another country doesn't magically solve your problems. Life still happens. Unexpected expenses happen. Health issues happen. Bad days happen. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling a fantasy. But what changed for me was the background noise, that constant feeling that life was becoming harder every year. That feeling slowly started fading. And once it did, I noticed something else. I had more energy for people. Back home, I spent most of my time alone. Not because I wanted to. That's just how life had become. My children had their own lives. Friends were busy. Neighbors mostly kept to themselves. Weeks could pass without a meaningful conversation. I didn't realize how isolated I had become until after I moved. Because the third lesson I learned wasn't about money or stress, it was about connection. And one of the biggest surprises I experienced in the Philippines was how difficult it became to stay lonely. Lesson number 3 was about connection. And honestly, I didn't expect this lesson at all. When I first started researching the Philippines, most people talked about affordability. They talked about beaches, food, weather, visas, cost of living. Very few people talked about what loneliness feels like after retirement. Maybe because it's not something many of us like to admit. Back in the United States, my life had become quiet. Too quiet. My children were grown. My friends had their own families and responsibilities. Everyone seemed busy. And as the years passed, it became normal to spend more and more time alone. At first, I didn't think much about it. Solitude isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's peaceful. But there's a difference between choosing to be alone and gradually becoming isolated. I didn't fully understand that difference until after I moved. One of the first things that surprised me was how often people acknowledged each other. Neighbors waved. Store employees remembered me. People started conversations while waiting in line. Even complete strangers would sometimes ask how I was doing. At first, I wasn't sure what to make of it. Back home, most people kept to themselves. You respected other people's space. You handled your business and moved on. Here, interactions felt different, more personal, more relaxed. One afternoon, I stopped at a small neighborhood store to buy a few things. What should have been a 2-minute errand somehow turned into a 20-minute conversation. A neighbor introduced himself. Then another person joined in. Before I knew it, I was standing there talking about life, retirement, America, and the local community. I remember walking home afterward and laughing to myself. In the United States, I could shop in the same store for years without learning anyone's name. Here, people seemed genuinely interested in getting to know each other. And then there was family. The first time I visited my partner's family home, I expected a quick visit, maybe a meal, a few introductions, then we'd head home. That's not what happened. People kept arriving, relatives, friends, neighbors, children running through the house, food appearing from every direction, conversations happening everywhere at once. At one point, I looked around the room and realized I couldn't even remember everyone's names. But somehow I felt welcome. Nobody seemed concerned about having the perfect house. Nobody cared if the furniture matched. Nobody was trying to impress anyone. People were simply enjoying being together. And there was something refreshing about that. Back home, many gatherings felt planned, scheduled, organized weeks in advance. Here, people seemed to find reasons to spend time together naturally. Birthdays became celebrations. Ordinary dinners became gatherings. Small moments turned into memories. Over time, I started noticing something. The less isolated I felt, the happier I became. Not because my life was suddenly perfect, but because human beings aren't meant to go through life completely alone. Connection matters. Conversation matters. Feeling like you belong somewhere matters. And that realization led directly to the fourth lesson. Because after years of thinking independence was one of life's greatest strengths, I started seeing it differently. I began to understand the difference between being independent and being disconnected. Lesson number 4 taught me something I wasn't expecting to learn at 71 years old. For most of my life, I believed independence was one of the most important things a person could have. I think a lot of Americans feel the same way. We're taught to stand on our own feet, solve our own problems, take care of ourselves, not depend on anyone. And there are good reasons for that. Independence builds confidence, responsibility, self-respect. But after moving to the Philippines, I began to notice something. The people around me valued something slightly different. They still worked hard. They still took responsibility for their lives. But they didn't seem obsessed with doing everything alone. Family helped family. Neighbors helped neighbors. People leaned on one another without feeling embarrassed about it. At first, I struggled to understand that mindset. I remember one afternoon when I needed help moving a piece of furniture. Back home, I probably would have figured it out myself, maybe struggled with it for an hour, maybe risked throwing my back out. Instead, before I even had a chance to ask, 2 people nearby offered to help. The job was finished in minutes. No discussion, no negotiation, no expectation of getting something in return, just people helping another person. I thanked them, and one of them laughed, as if the idea of not helping had never even crossed his mind. That moment stayed with me, not because of the furniture, because of what it revealed. Somewhere along the way, I had started treating independence like a requirement, as if needing help was some kind of weakness. But the older I get, the more I realize that's not true. Nobody gets through life completely alone, not when we're young, not when we're raising families, and certainly not when we're older. The strongest people I've met aren't the ones who refuse help. They're the ones who know how to give it and how to receive it. That lesson changed the way I looked at retirement. Because retirement isn't just a financial challenge, it's a social one. Many people spend decades surrounded by coworkers, customers, clients, and routines. Then suddenly, those daily connections disappear. The paycheck isn't the only thing that stops. The social structure disappears too. And if we're not careful, isolation quietly takes its place. I didn't fully appreciate that before moving. Now I see it everywhere. The happiest retirees I've met aren't necessarily the wealthiest. They aren't the ones with the biggest homes or the largest savings accounts. They're usually the people who have strong relationships, people who belong somewhere, people who have others around them. And that realization prepared me for lesson number 5. Because one of the biggest adjustments I faced wasn't financial. It wasn't cultural. It wasn't even social. It was learning how to slow down. And at first, I was terrible at it. Lesson number 5 was learning how to slow down. That may sound simple. I thought it would be simple too. I was wrong. For most of my life, my days were structured around schedules. Wake up, go to work, run errands, pay bills, make appointments, meet deadlines. There was always something that needed attention. Even after retirement, that habit never completely disappeared. I still found myself looking at the clock, planning the next task, thinking about what needed to get done tomorrow, or next week, or next month. Then I moved to the Philippines, and almost immediately, I noticed something felt different. People still worked hard, businesses still operated, life still moved forward. but the pace felt different. Less rushed, less frantic, more patient. The first time someone told me they would come by this afternoon, I assumed that meant a specific time. So I waited and waited and waited some more. A couple of hours passed, then another. I started becoming irritated. Back home, being late usually meant something was wrong, or disrespectful, or unprofessional. When the person finally arrived, he wasn't stressed. He wasn't apologizing. He wasn't rushing to explain himself. He smiled, greeted me warmly, and acted as though the day was unfolding exactly as expected. At first, that drove me crazy. I won't pretend otherwise. I spent years believing efficiency was always the goal. If something took 20 minutes, why spend an hour? If something could be finished today, why wait until tomorrow? The logic seemed obvious, but over time, I started noticing something. The people around me didn't seem nearly as stressed as I was. They weren't constantly checking their watches. They weren't rushing through conversations. They weren't treating every moment like a race against the clock. And gradually, something began to change inside me. I started sitting outside more. I stopped feeling guilty about doing nothing. I let conversations last longer. I became less concerned about squeezing every ounce of productivity out of every day. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt present. Looking back, I think many of us spend our entire lives preparing for the future. We're preparing for next week, next year, retirement, the next goal, the next milestone, the next responsibility. And before we know it, decades have passed. We become so focused on what's coming next that we forget to enjoy where we are. That's what this lesson taught me. Slowing down isn't laziness, it's awareness. It's being present enough to notice your life while you're living it. And the strange thing is, once I stopped rushing through my days, I started noticing things I had been missing. Small things, simple things. The sound of children playing outside, neighbors laughing together in the evening, a sunset I would have previously walked right past. Those moments don't cost anything, but they became some of the most valuable parts of my day. And that led me to lesson number 6, because once I slowed down enough to pay attention, I began questioning something I had believed for most of my adult life. I started asking myself a difficult question. What if comfort and happiness aren't the same thing? Lesson number 6 was realizing that comfort and happiness aren't always the same thing. For most of my adult life, I assumed they were connected. Work hard, earn more, buy a nicer home, upgrade your lifestyle, make life more comfortable, and naturally, you'll be happier. That's what I believed for decades. And to be fair, there is some truth to it. Financial security matters. Having a safe place to live matters. Being able to pay your bills matters. Anyone struggling to survive already knows that. But somewhere along the way, I started assuming that more comfort automatically meant more happiness. The older I get, the less certain I am about that. Back in the United States, I had a larger home than I do now, more possessions, more storage space, more things. Over the years, I accumulated furniture, tools, decorations, electronics, and boxes filled with things I hadn't touched in years. At the time, it felt normal. Most people I knew were doing the same thing. You spend a lifetime collecting pieces of a life you've built. Then one day, you're surrounded by things you rarely use. When I decided to move overseas, I faced a difficult reality. Most of it wasn't coming with me. I sold some of it, gave some away, donated what I could. And surprisingly, letting go of those things wasn't nearly as painful as I expected. In fact, it felt freeing. I remember standing in my house after most of my belongings were gone. The rooms looked strange, almost empty. At first, it felt unsettling. Then something unexpected happened. I realized how little I actually needed, not how little I could survive with, how little I genuinely needed to be content. After moving to the Philippines, my life became simpler. Smaller home, fewer possessions, less clutter, less maintenance, less time spent managing things, and more time spent actually living. That's when I started questioning something. How much of my life had been spent maintaining possessions instead of enjoying experiences? How many hours had I spent mowing lawns, cleaning rooms, organizing garages, fixing things, replacing things, storing things? The answer was probably more than I wanted to admit. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting everyone sell everything they own. This isn't one of those stories where a man suddenly discovers happiness living with 2 shirts and a folding chair. That's not reality. The lesson was much simpler than that. The lesson was realizing that comfort has limits. At a certain point, more stuff doesn't necessarily create a better life. Sometimes it creates more responsibility, more maintenance, more things competing for your time and attention. The happiest moments I've experienced since moving weren't connected to possessions at all. They came from conversations, experiences, relationships, moments that cost little or nothing. And once I started seeing that, I began looking at success differently too. Because for most of my life, success had a very specific definition. More money, a bigger house, a larger savings account, a longer list of accomplishments. But the longer I lived here, the more that definition started changing. And that became lesson number 7. Because the Philippines didn't just change where I lived. It slowly changed how I defined success itself. Lesson number 7 was about success. And honestly, this lesson surprised me more than any of the others. For most of my life, success seemed easy to measure. You looked at a person's job, their income, the size of their house, the car in their driveway, the things they owned. Those were the signals, the proof that someone was doing well. I spent decades chasing many of those same goals, not because I was greedy, because I wanted security. I wanted to provide for my family. I wanted to build a stable life. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But after moving to the Philippines, I started noticing something. Some of the happiest people I met weren't wealthy, not even close. Many lived in homes that Americans would consider modest. Some earned less money in a month than many Americans spend on a single weekend. Yet they laughed more, spent more time together, seemed less consumed by stress. At first, I couldn't understand it. I kept thinking there had to be something I was missing, because back home, we spend so much of our lives believing happiness is waiting just beyond the next financial goal, the next promotion, the next raise, the next achievement, the next purchase. We tell ourselves we're almost there, just a little further. Then life will be easier. Then we'll relax. Then we'll enjoy ourselves. But what if almost there never arrives? That question stayed with me. I remember sitting outside one evening watching a group of neighbors gathered together. Nothing special was happening. No holiday, no celebration, no major event, just people spending time together talking, laughing, sharing food, enjoying each other's company. And I realized something. Many of them already had what I had spent decades searching for. Not money, not possessions, not status. They had enough. Enough food, enough friendship, enough purpose, enough connection, enough reasons to smile. And maybe that's something we don't talk about often enough, the idea of enough. Because in America, we're constantly encouraged to want more money, more success, more things, more accomplishments, more everything. But eventually I began asking myself a different question. What if success isn't about having more? What if it's about needing less? That thought changed the way I viewed retirement. It changed the way I viewed money. And it changed the way I viewed my own life. For the first time in years, I stopped measuring success by what I owned. I started measuring it by how I felt. Was I at peace? Did I enjoy my days? Did I have people around me? Did I wake up looking forward to life? Those questions suddenly felt more important than the balance of a bank account. And that realization prepared me for lesson number 8. Because once I stopped chasing more, I started noticing something else. Some of the things I feared most before moving here turned out to matter far less than I imagined. Lesson number 8 was realizing how many things I worried about that never really mattered. Before I moved to the Philippines, I spent months researching, probably too many months. I watched videos, read forums, read comment sections, listen to other people's experiences. And if you've ever spent enough time online, you know something happens. The more information you consume, the more problems you discover. I heard warnings about everything: the heat, the traffic, the brownouts, the insects, the roosters, the language, the culture, the food. At one point, I felt like I was preparing for a survival expedition instead of retirement. The funny thing is that once I actually arrived, most of those fears turned out to be much smaller than I imagined. Take roosters, for example. Before moving here, I heard endless stories about them. People complained about them constantly. I pictured myself lying awake every morning, frustrated and exhausted. Then I arrived. And yes, the roosters were exactly as advertised. They crowed early. They crowed often. Sometimes they seemed to crow simply because another rooster had crowed first. For the first few weeks, I noticed them constantly. Then something unexpected happened. I stopped noticing them. They became part of the background, like traffic in a city or waves near the ocean. Life has a funny way of normalizing things. The same thing happened with brownouts. The first time the power went out, I expected everyone around me to panic. Back home, power outages often felt like emergencies. Here, people mostly adapted. Someone grabbed a flashlight. Someone started a conversation. Life continued. Over time, I learned to keep a rechargeable fan nearby and stopped worrying about it. Even the geckos surprised me. The first time I saw one on a wall, I jumped. I admit it. A grown man in his 70s, startled by a tiny lizard. My partner laughed so hard she nearly cried. Then she explained that geckos help keep insects under control. After that, I started looking at them differently. Instead of unwanted guests, they became tiny roommates, paying rent through pest control. Looking back now, I realized something. Most of the things I feared before moving here were inconveniences, not life-changing problems, just inconveniences. And yet I spent months giving them space in my head. How often do we do that in life? How often do we imagine worst case scenarios that never happen? How many opportunities do we miss because we're focused on problems that exist only in our imagination? I'm not saying people shouldn't do research or think carefully before making major decisions. Of course they should. But eventually there comes a point where gathering more information stops helping and starts creating fear. The truth is that every place has imperfections. America does. The Philippines does. Everywhere does. The goal isn't finding a perfect place. The goal is finding a place where the positives outweigh the negatives for you. And once I stopped focusing on what could go wrong, I started paying more attention to what was going right. That realization led me to lesson number 9. Because after living here for a while, I began noticing something that had nothing to do with money, stress, or culture. It had to do with gratitude and how easy it is to forget the things that are already good in our lives. Lesson number 9 was about gratitude. And I'll be honest, this wasn't something I expected to learn from moving halfway around the world. For most of my life, gratitude was something I thought about occasionally, usually around holidays, or after something difficult happened, or when I heard about someone going through a harder situation than my own. But I didn't think of it as something that could change the way a person experiences everyday life. Then I retired. And like many retirees, I found myself focusing on what was missing. Income wasn't what it used to be. Friends were moving away. Family was busy with their own lives. My body didn't always cooperate the way it once had. Without realizing it, I had developed a habit. I was constantly measuring what had been lost. Lost youth, lost energy, lost opportunities, lost earning power, lost time. And the strange thing is, when you focus on what's missing, life starts feeling smaller. Not because your circumstances have changed, because your attention has changed. After moving to the Philippines, something shifted. Partly because life was different. Partly because I was paying attention again. I found myself appreciating things I had stopped noticing years earlier. Morning coffee while the neighborhood slowly came to life. A conversation with someone who had nowhere else to be. A meal shared with people who were genuinely happy to see one another. A quiet evening sitting outside while the sun disappeared behind the trees. None of those moments were extraordinary. That's exactly the point. Most of life isn't extraordinary. Most of life is made up of ordinary moments, and somewhere along the way, I had forgotten how valuable those moments actually are. One afternoon, I caught myself smiling for no particular reason. Nothing special had happened. I hadn't won money. I hadn't received good news. There wasn't some life-changing event taking place. I was simply enjoying the day. And that realization caught me off guard because I couldn't remember the last time I had done that. For years, happiness had become tied to conditions. I'll be happy when this problem is solved. I'll be happy when I have more money. I'll be happy when things get easier. But what if happiness isn't waiting somewhere in the future? What if it exists in moments we're too distracted to notice? That question changed me, not overnight, not dramatically, but little by little. I became more aware of what was already good in my life. And the more grateful I became, the less I felt like I was lacking something. That's when I realized something important. The biggest change that happened after moving wasn't external. It wasn't the lower cost of living. It wasn't the weather. It wasn't the culture. the biggest change happened inside me. And that realization led directly to the final lesson. The lesson that made me realize I'd been thinking about retirement all wrong for most of my life. Lesson number 10 was realizing that retirement was never the goal. For most of my life, I thought it was. I think a lot of people do. We're taught a simple formula: work hard, save money, be responsible, reach retirement, then enjoy life. That was the plan. The finish line waiting somewhere in the distance. And for decades, that's exactly how I viewed it. Retirement was the reward, the destination, the moment when life would finally become easier. But sitting outside one evening in the Philippines, I realized something that stopped me in my tracks. I had spent so many years preparing for retirement that I hadn't spent enough time preparing for life. I know that sounds strange, maybe even a little dramatic, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. For decades, my focus had been on someday. Someday, I'll have more time. Someday, I'll travel. Someday, I'll relax. Someday, I'll enjoy myself. Someday, I'll slow down. Someday, I'll do the things I've been putting off. The problem is that someday has a way of staying in the future. Years pass, then decades. And before you know it, you're looking back wondering where all the time went. Moving to the Philippines didn't magically solve that problem. What it did was force me to see it. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing toward the next milestone. I wasn't waiting for the next phase of life to begin. I was living the phase I was already in, and that changed everything. I stopped viewing retirement as the finish line. I started viewing it as another chapter, a chapter that could still contain growth, friendships, adventure, purpose, new experiences, new lessons, even at 71 years old. That realization surprised me, because if you'd asked me 10 years earlier whether people continue changing in their 70s, I probably would have said not much. Now I know better. I've changed more in the last year than I expected. Not because I moved to another country, because I finally gave myself permission to live differently, to think differently, to stop measuring my life by the standards I had carried for decades. And maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. The Philippines didn't save me. It didn't magically fix every problem. It didn't turn my life into a permanent vacation. Anyone who tells you that isn't being honest. Life is still life. Problems still happen. Bad days still happen. Unexpected expenses still happen. But what this move gave me was something I thought I was slowly losing. Space. Space to breathe. Space to think. Space to enjoy ordinary days again. Space to feel connected to people around me. Space to appreciate what I already have. And maybe that's what I had been searching for all along. Not a cheaper life, a fuller one. When my children told me I was making a mistake, they were worried about me. And honestly, I don't blame them. If someone I loved told me they were moving halfway around the world at 71 years old, I'd probably worry too. But today, if they asked whether I regret the decision, my answer would be simple. No. Not because everything has been perfect, because this experience reminded me that life doesn't stop just because we get older. There are still things to learn, still people to meet, still experiences waiting for us, still chapters left to write. And if there's one thing I hope you take away from my story, it's this. Don't spend your entire life waiting for the perfect moment to start living. The perfect moment rarely arrives. Life is happening right now, today, this week, this year. Not someday, not eventually. Now, I came to the Philippines thinking I was trying to stretch my retirement. What I really found was something much more valuable, a reminder that it's never too late to start living differently.